300 feet below the surface, in a steel compartment packed with 2,000-pound torpedoes. There is no room for error. Hydraulic systems strain. Weapons sit armed feet from where sailors sleep and work. If something goes wrong, there is no fresh air, no immediate rescue, no stepping outside. The ocean presses in from every direction. 6 torpedomen once found themselves trapped in conditions no sailor ever wants to face. Others have been crushed, burned, or nearly lost in accidents that never make headlines. The deadliest job on a U.S. Navy submarine isn't driving it. It isn't running the reactor. It's working in the torpedo room. And when something fails down there, it fails fast. That danger has a date. December 17th, 1927. The U.S. Navy submarine USSS-4 was conducting a routine submerged runoff Provincetown, Massachusetts, when the Coast Guard cutter Paulding struck her just below the surface. The collision ripped a jagged hole in the hull and sent the submarine to the bottom in 110 feet of frigid Atlantic water. Inside, the impact hurled sailors against steel bulkheads. Forward compartments flooded within seconds. Men scrambled to slam watertight doors shut, sealing off the rushing sea. In the forward torpedo room, 6 torpedomen were cut off, alive but trapped. Above them, winter seas churned as Navy and Coast Guard ships fought to hold position over the wreck, and divers descended through darkness and near-freezing water. When Navy diver Thomas Eady reached the hull and tapped on the torpedo loading hatch, 6 faint replies came back. They were still alive. For days, rescuers and survivors exchanged Morse code messages through the steel. The trapped sailors asked for air, for food, for hope, but weather, depth, and limited technology worked against them. By the time airlines and rescue gear were finally secured, all 6 torpedomen had died. The disaster reshaped submarine rescue forever, but it also revealed a brutal truth of how deadly this job is. If you're proud of the men and women who protect American warships from the inside out, hit like and subscribe so you never miss our defense breakdowns. Torpedomen carry out one of the most critical and exacting jobs on the boat. Known officially as torpedo man's mates, these sailors are the specialists charged with everything involving the submarine's underwater weapons. They take care of the heavy torpedoes that patrol the deep and the missiles and countermeasure systems that protect the boat's stealth and safety. If a torpedo is to be loaded into its tube, prepared for launch, and fired with precision when the order comes, a torpedoman has to be there every step of the way. Torpedomen usually spend their days in the auxiliary compartments and torpedo rooms, where they handle, maintain, and test the complex systems that make aquatic firepower possible. They need a blend of mechanical skill, careful planning, and calm under pressure. They also remove, inspect, and secure components of weapons, using voltmeters, hydraulic tools, and specialized equipment to verify that each system is safe and ready. They have to check and double-check every gauge, seal, and electrical connection before a torpedo ever slides into its launcher. Torpedomen are also responsible for the safe storage, movement, and accountability of these weapons. But they are stuck in a very small room surrounded by weapons and explosives. Lives and missions depend on what's at the end of a torpedo tube, so there is no margin for error. Torpedomen spend long hours working side by side with some of the most dangerous machines a sailor can encounter, which are torpedoes. These are self-propelled underwater weapons packed with high explosives and complex fuel and propulsion systems. A torpedo is a small missile with its own engine and guidance, designed to carry a powerful warhead through the ocean with precision. The explosives inside are engineered to unleash massive destructive force when they strike a target. In naval history beyond the U.S. submarine force, torpedo systems have proven that malfunctions can be catastrophic. On the Royal Navy's HMS Sidon, a fault torpedo that began a so-called hot run while still inside its tube rupturing its casing burst through bulkheads and released fire and toxic gases that killed several sailors before the boat sank. The weapon itself can become a killer right inside the hull. Even the Russian submarine Kursk exploded because of leaking fuel in the torpedo, and this accident killed everyone inside. In the U.S. Navy, the S-4 submarine saw 6 torpedomen suffocate while stuck underwater after an accident. Even without a warhead detonation, the fuel and propulsion systems of a torpedo have highly energetic chemicals, just like monopropellants and oxidizers. If these leak or are mishandled, they can ignite and instantly blow up the submarine. In fact, working in a small place and handling dangerous weapons seems like a recipe for danger. If a fire starts near these systems, it generates toxic gases and deprives the compartment of oxygen. This is really deadly, especially since a submarine has a sealed, pressurized environment where air can't be vented out. For a torpedo man, the torpedo room may look like a small workspace, but it's surrounded by live weapons and constant risk, and it's not just the torpedoes that make it deadly. Its location inside the submarine adds another layer of danger. There have been moments when sailors were trapped underwater in that very room and barely made it out. So, what really makes this compartment one of the most dangerous places at sea? On the morning of October 28, 1923, as USS-05 steamed toward the entrance of the Panama Canal, routine became disaster in an instant when the submarine was rammed by the steamship Abangares and sank in less than a minute in Lemon Bay, with the hull resting in about 40 feet of water. Sailors who had been topside or near escape hatches scrambled upward and out, but below, torpedoman second class Henry Breault was in the forward torpedo room when the collision struck. Aboard this tightly packed metal tube, there was barely any room for movement, much less time to think. Water rushed in everywhere else, and the torpedo room remained one of the few spaces still filled with air. Breault made it almost to the deck and the open sea, but then realized a shipmate was still trapped below in the flooding boat. Instead of abandoning him, he turned back into the dark and rising water, closing the torpedo room hatch and sealed them inside, buying a fragile space of breathable air and precious time. With no food and only a flashlight, Breault and the trapped torpedomen waited in silence. Above water, the salvage crews worked through grueling hours, rigging cranes and cables to lift the battered submarine just enough for the torpedo room hatch to break the surface. After 31 tense hours, the 2 men were finally freed. For his selfless choice to risk certain death to save another, Breault became the first enlisted submariner in U.S. history to receive the Medal of Honor. Although the torpedo room wasn't flooded in this case, this room has the highest risk of getting flooded, and that's another factor that makes it the deadliest job on a submarine. The forward torpedo room where the torpedo men work is at the very front of the submarine. This is the compartment that faces the ocean head-on, and its massive torpedo tubes penetrate the steel pressure hull where salt water sits. This is where the submarine's primary weapons are housed, prepared, and serviced. But it also holds the margin between life and catastrophe. The torpedo room sits directly behind the outer doors that open to the sea to launch weapons. If those doors, seals, or surrounding hull get damaged, whether in collision, combat, or under the intense pressure of a deep dive, this is the place that gets flooded first. Submarine designers know how vulnerable this place is. Instead of being buried deep inside the hull, the room sits forward of most other spaces. With 6 or more torpedo tubes in its forward bulkhead, racks of spare torpedoes along the sides, and heavy handling equipment crowded into tight quarters. But looking at previous incidents, flooding in the forward torpedo room was among the most serious threats a submerged vessel could face, because water entering here could not be isolated quickly enough. Unlike the compartments deeper inside the hull, which are buffered by bulkheads and interior spaces, the torpedo room is close to the ocean, which means a failed seal or structural breach allows water to pour in with sea pressure behind it, overwhelming pumps and threatening to pull the boat down. Even if the crew manages to close watertight doors, the window of time for stopping the flooding is measured in seconds before airspace collapses and the room fills. This is what makes the torpedo room packed with weapons and connected directly to the sea, the single greatest flooding risk area on a submarine. Every sailor who works in the forward torpedo room constantly trains for the moment when water could suddenly become their greatest enemy. But whenever submarines are attacked, it's always the bow first, which means torpedo men are the ones in the most danger. What other reasons make this job so deadly? When U.S. submarines prowled the Pacific and Atlantic during World War II, they hunted their foes by moving bow first toward enemy convoys and lining up to fire spreads of torpedoes through their forward tubes. Although this increased the chance of a successful hit, it also placed the torpedo room sailors very close to the danger the instant the submarine was discovered. Once a torpedo salvo broke in, the submarine sank deeper into the water and went into silent running to evade retaliation. But in cases like these, the enemy escorts don't wait. They close in and start pounding the area with an escalating pattern of blasts focused on crushing or fishing the hidden submarine. For the torpedo men, these moments were some of the most nerve-wracking parts of the patrol. Below deck, they would feel a whoosh as the boat dove after firing, followed almost immediately by the first brutal detonation of depth charges exploding in the water just above. In extreme cases, like that experienced by USS Trigger on the 8th of April 1944, multiple enemy explosions ripped through the sound-dampened hull for hours, eventually flooding the forward torpedo room to the deck plates and damaging critical systems before the sub could surface and limp home. In the unforgiving environment of war, every counterattack could mean extreme danger for the torpedo men. They absorbed some of the fiercest punishment because their station sat at the very front of the submarine. But even in peacetime, the torpedo room isn't safe. Imagine working in a cramped steel compartment surrounded by explosives where a single mistake could trigger catastrophe. And that danger doesn't just come from enemy fire. The work of a torpedo man is done with hands, muscle, sweat, and constant motion in a space where every inch matters. Torpedoes themselves are massive pieces of machinery, often over 20 feet long and weighing well over a ton each, packed with guidance systems, propulsion gear, and warheads capable of massive destruction. In earlier submarines especially, getting one of these behemoths from its rack into a firing tube was a battle in itself. Crew members had to leverage ropes, chains, block and tackle rigs, and every ounce of strength they had just to manhandle the weapon along narrow skids and into place. A missed step could mean an ignited missile. The torpedo room is already crowded with equipment like racks holding multiple torpedoes, the tubes themselves jutting forward through the hull. Hydraulic and pneumatic systems, gauges and valves controlling air and water pressure, and handling gear that in calmer conditions required precision, but under stress demanded absolute focus. Sailors working there had to handle the sheer weight of the weapons, but the constant motion of the submarine. At the same time, they maintained perfect coordination with fellow crewmen in tight spaces, so they usually brushed shoulders as they moved. Today, there are modern hydraulic and powered handling systems, but the job still calls for physical effort and careful movements. After all, a torpedo only fits the tube one way. If it isn't aligned right, the entire launch sequence and the safety of the boat can be compromised. Aside from the torpedoes themselves, the entire torpedo room and its equipment come with chemicals and hazards that pose real risks. The danger in a torpedo room doesn't come from the heavy weapons and cramped room alone. Torpedoes themselves are packed with high explosives and complex propulsion systems. The act of preparing them to launch involves working with high-pressure air systems and powerful machinery that could injure or poison a crewman if something goes wrong. Submarines use compressed air at pressures of thousands of pounds per square inch to operate ballast tanks and torpedo impulse systems that force a weapon out of its tube. If a line ruptures, a valve fails, or a seal breaks, the resulting blast of air can seriously injure anyone nearby. The torpedo room also contains hazardous materials and potential contaminants. Submariners are exposed to dozens of chemicals from machinery, batteries, and air systems every day, and some of these can build up in the enclosed atmosphere and cause health issues over time. Toxic gases like oxides of nitrogen found in these equipment and batteries, long after a maintenance evolution has ended. While the torpedo room is already one of the most dangerous spaces aboard a submarine, packed with heavy weapons, toxic fumes, and the constant risk of flooding, The real danger lies elsewhere on certain boats. It's the nuclear reactor operator aboard modern nuclear submarines. What exactly makes this position even more hazardous than working in the torpedo room? In a U.S. Navy nuclear submarine, a small team of sailors carries a responsibility unlike any other on the boat. They are the stewards of the ship's nuclear heart. Known as nuclear reactor operators and engineers, these sailors spend their days deep inside the submarine's engineering spaces, monitoring gauges, adjusting controls, and watching streams of data that trace the invisible forces keeping the reactor stable and the boat alive. The reactor they oversee powers propulsion, electrical systems, and life support. And it does so by harnessing the energy released when atoms split inside a pressurized core. For this to be safe and effective, the process needs to be kept within very precise limits. Accidents aren't as common with this job as before thanks to the safety systems and intense training. But any serious reactor malfunction could be catastrophic for these operators, and probably the entire crew. What now? You know why the torpedo room has long been considered one of the most dangerous places aboard a submarine, where sailors work beside explosives, toxic chemicals, and the constant threat of flooding deep beneath the ocean. So which job do you think is truly the deadliest on board? The torpedo man facing danger at the bow, or the nuclear operator guarding the reactor at the heart of the boat? Let's know your thoughts in the comments. For more insights into life in the Navy, subscribe and hit the bell. We'll see you in the next video.